Hi, I'm Daniel Strauss of Talking Points Memo, and this is another edition of Blogging Heads, and I'm here with Gabriel Debenedetti of Reuters, and we're going to talk Hillary Clinton 2016, a little bit about Mississippi because it's the campaign that never ends, and then we're going to talk about American soccer. Hi, Gabe.
Hey, how's it going?
It's the first time we could get you on here. I'm glad we can do this.
Yeah, glad we finally set it up. And what a day!
Yeah.
What a day to do it! What a week, really.
Yeah, it's really more of a week thing, I think, or maybe sort of a month.
Yeah,
I think,
maybe a year.
yeah, maybe a year. The big thing in the Hillary Clinton and really the 2016 world, because Hillary is the only game in town right now for 2016, is
At least as far
whether
as
she
Democrats
was,
go, right?
yeah, is whether, yeah, at least as far as Democrats go, is whether she was ever poor when she left the White House. And there's been a lot of discussion about this.
Right.
Please correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that what happened was after, in her book, she has this description where she says after she and Bill left the White House, they had no money.
Well,
And she was called out about this by my hometown's very own Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And that really sort of
so
started a spiral in which she's had to sort of backtrack and all of that. And you've been covering Hillary a lot for Reuters.
right.
So
Well, to give a
take it
little,
away.
yeah, to give a little background of what's been going on. Obviously, she had the book out towards the beginning of the month. Hard Choices, her new memoir, which is ostensibly a memoir of her time at the State Department, though it's obviously a bit further reaching than that. What happened was in her first interview about the book, or actually in a series of interviews about the book, she stumbled a bit when asked about her finances. And Rahm Emanuel, your hometown mayor, as you said, is one of the people who gave her a little bit of a hard time about it. But he is someone who's friendly. He's a friend of the Clintons, obviously having worked with Bill. But in these interviews, Hillary Clinton stumbled over her words a bit and made it seem as if she was saying her words were they were dead broke after leaving the White House. Now, the fact of the matter is they did have lots and lots of legal debt because of their legal fees when they were in the White House. That very quickly was remedied because Bill Clinton is an extremely highly paid speaker. Half the reporters in town have been going through those financial disclosures for the last few weeks. They very quickly climbed out of that debt and are in extremely good financial position now. The real question we should keep in mind isn't whether or not the Clintons are wealthy. There's no doubt that they have a lot of money at this point in time, particularly, maybe not in 2001, in January 2001, but compared to any average citizen, they certainly have a lot of money. The question is whether Hillary Clinton is in touch with the average voter. Presumably that's an important question because, she might run for president.
Yeah, so I mean, a few things about this. One of the most shocking things about this was Rahm,
Yeah.
who is kind of known as a loose cannon, but I was surprised that he called out, the presumptive Democratic nominee for 2016, I guess, and his
Yeah.
former boss's wife. Were you surprised about that? Where
Well,
he's at this Chicago Ideas Week thing, and he was like, first question, you say you're dead broke, really? And there was
yeah,
sort of laughter from the audience.
that's right. Well, it's very important to keep in mind that, again, he is a friend of the Clintons. In some respects, this could be seen as him doing them a little bit of a favor.
Really?
He gave her an opportunity to, well, not entirely, but he gave Hillary Clinton an opportunity to clarify her remarks. Let's keep in mind, he is fundraising for Ready for Hillary, the PAC that's backing her possible candidacy, while at the same time Bill Clinton is fundraising for him. He has very little incentive to go out there and shoot down a potential Hillary Clinton candidacy over an issue like this, particularly when he says that he is explicitly for her.
Yeah.
They knew going into it that was going to be a friendly setting. With that in mind, Hillary Clinton had a possibility to fix up her remarks. That said, she didn't necessarily do a great job of it there. the issue has kept coming. We've seen a slew of reports from a number of sites, newspapers. Everyone has been poring over this because it's an interesting topic. Even if we put aside the issue, yes, they have a lot of money. The question of how they live, how the Clintons live, how they maintain this lifestyle is a very interesting one, especially if they intend to return to the public eye in an electoral fashion, shall we say?
I have a friend who's a Republican, like, and very much, very, very opposed to Hillary in
Mm-hmm.
2016. And I mean, like, I wonder if this is sort of like the Obama's Hillary Clinton is Bush light comment in 2008, or that campaign where people made a big deal about it at the time, but like it didn't really last.
Yeah.
Is this something that's going to dog her for a while?
Well, it has the potential to, because it's the kind of thing where there will always be more material out there to get. Hillary Clinton has been in the public eye for over 2 decades. Well, that family has. Um, so there are two sides of this coin. One is that all of these scandals, all of this stuff has been, well, to a certain extent at least, poured over already. People know about a lot of this stuff. It's not new. And what the Clinton camp may be saying right now is, this isn't disqualifying for a presidential race. It's July, the beginning of July 2014. The first votes won't be for another 17, 18 months in a primary if she even gets a challenger. This is the kind of thing, the American public does not like to dwell on one topic for this long in an election, particularly because, let's keep in mind, we already have a guy in the Oval Office. There's a midterm election and a bunch of primaries even between now and then. And then, lots of Republicans will run for president. Other Democrats might run too.
So it sounds like you strongly think that Hillary's going to run. I mean, like, one thing that I thought Hillary was going to run, but the way she sort of name checks her book all the time, and she's in like every appearance, every interview, she's now saying like hard choices, hard choices. I think that's the biggest tell ever that she's going to run for president and she really wants to do this.
Or that her publicist told her to say the title of the book a lot. I mean, many signs point to her running. She could put together a total campaign infrastructure very quickly. She has support over any other Democrat by essentially unprecedented margins. I don't know what she's thinking personally. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the Democratic infrastructure in Washington and around the country, not to mention the Republican infrastructure, because the Republicans already have a lot of, have mobilized against her already, have expended a lot of resources here in Washington and around the country to ensuring that she does not become president. It would be a big shock, and the political economy, let's say, would go through a major reshuffling, and it would be fascinating, but I would be very surprised.
So, I mean, is that the biggest story with Hillary right now, or are people sort of distracted by that, and should we be paying attention to something else in her book? Well, one of the big things at TPM that we've covered lately is like how Hillary can differentiate herself from Obama.
Yes, yes, it's fascinating. The book, we should note, is largely a foreign policy document, right? It's supposed to be a memoir of her time at the State Department. I wrote about this in March. She's been subtly, inching away from Obama on some foreign policy issues, even when all that entails is saying publicly or writing in the book, this is what I wanted to do, this is what we actually did. In the book, she came out as slightly more forceful on arming or training Syrian rebels than Obama was, and the country, of course, did not do that. And that has come up more and more recently. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this is an opportunity for her?
I mean, it's weird. It's kind of a weird dance she has to be in because she was Obama's Secretary of State. And she was, I think, the most popular Secretary of State under Obama, but Obama's not very popular right now. So but it also doesn't surprise me that she's more hawkish than Obama on foreign policy. I mean, that sort of was something that I got from her in 2008.
We've known that
And
for a while, right?
yeah, but she's had to be in the Obama administration, and she's had to follow the administration's policies on foreign policy. So it seems like she has to, I mean, she has to sort of own up to some of that while also differentiating herself from an unpopular president.
That's right.
I like I have not read the book yet. Hard Choices really strikes me as like the audacity of hope. It's the pre-write book to running for president, and it's like one of those things you have to do, right?
Yeah.
Before you run for president, you release a book, and
Right.
this is what she has to address as the former Secretary of State,
Right.
and essentially the presumptive Democratic nominee for president.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few models for pre-campaign or post-cabinet books. I've written a little bit about this, and I've talked to a few people who read the book before it came out, who are in Clinton world, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They say this is a book not written for a foreign policy breathing audience. This is not a policy document like many pre-campaign documents are. But this is a book that is written for, the words of this source of mine was, a bookseller in Des Moines. I mean, it couldn't be clearer that if she just wanted to write about policy, if she just wanted to tell the story of my time as Secretary of State, she could have written a book along the lines of Bob Gates's book, Duty, which made headlines, but not in a way that would ever let him become the president. It's a very safe book, as you saw in a lot of the reviews over the last few weeks. You write a book because you can write a book in a situation like this. If she wants it to be...
Really? I feel like you write a book when everyone's saying you're going to run for president because you want to run for president.
Well, those aren't mutually exclusive.
Okay.
As I've said, it would be a surprise to a lot of the established political infrastructure. I don't want to say establishment necessarily, if she didn't run. A big part of every campaign is writing a book. Let's be totally clear. Ted Cruz has a book coming out. Mike Huckabee has a book coming out. Andrew Cuomo even has a book coming out, just in case. Elizabeth Warren's book just came out. Rick Santorum's book just came out. A lot of these people, even if we don't think they're going to run for president this time around, at some point they might, or they will at least be in serious discussions too.
Mm-hmm. So what is so the book is done, or the book thing is out there. What is the important thing to pay attention to with Hillary Clinton right now? Because I feel like there's a lot of chatter about her. There are a lot of articles about her. But I don't really know how or what I should be watching, even if I were to assume that she's running for president, which I think she is. But
there's a serious there's a serious argument to be made that we should really be paying attention to the midterms. And that's what Hillary Clinton says. That's what everyone around her certainly says. They say, when you ask political questions, basically, give it some time here. Surrounding Hillary, it'll be really interesting to see how she handles the rest of this book tour. She's off in Europe now, where she's going to get a very different kind of audience. People aren't going to be looking for every gaffe. And frankly, there's going to be a lot less attention paid to her. So she has a little bit of a rest. That said, she's still in Europe. It's not as if she's, on vacation.
Right.
But with her, it'll be interesting to see her reaction to all the scrutiny, because the number one question with all this isn't, is it politically advantageous for her to run for president? It's, does she want to run for president? And that's right. What she has always said, and her team has always said, is the number one reason that she might not. Maybe she just doesn't want to. All indications are that she very much might, but I don't know what she's thinking.
One of the most interesting things about the 2014 and potential 2016 candidates to me is that is based on an article you wrote which said that Hillary's super sought after.
Right.
And another possible 2016 candidate who is super popular in Democratic circles that everybody wants to campaign for them is Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, there are other Democrats out there.
Right, but like Elizabeth Warren and Hillary Clinton being on the campaign trail, I mean, those are the two Democrats that every candidate wants.
Yeah,
And Warren was just in Kentucky,
right.
and she's going to be other places where there are really embattled races. And it's a little weird to see her there because she's a super liberal, super populist candidate,
That's right.
but she fundraises amazingly.
Yeah.
Um, I
Well,
mean, I don't like, I just don't know what to think of that because at the same time, Hillary, we know, I'm very much of the opinion that she's running for president or at least setting the groundwork if she wanted to run for president. That's why she keeps appearing on the trail. Besides the fact that she's a popular Democrat who Democrats like, and Republicans may not like her, but she's going to be around. She's one of the standard bearers of the party right now. Like, do you think there's going to be some kind of tacit combat between the two potential 2016 candidates?
I think if you're looking at people who are possible other 2016 candidates other than Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side, Elizabeth Warren has been extremely prominent among active Democrats in promoting her own book, in campaigning, in fundraising, not so much for major donors, because a lot of major donors who are aligned with the financial world are rather wary of her, while many of them love Hillary Clinton. It's more small donors. But look at someone more like Martin O'Malley. Now, if the question is, let's just focus on 2014, who are the main surrogates? It's really a two-person game. You have Hillary Clinton, and you have Elizabeth Warren. Now, there's also Joe Biden, let's not forget. And there's also this guy, Barack Obama.
Right.
But they also have major, there are reasons for that Democrats don't want to see them on the trail. Namely, their respective popularity is just not that great right now. Now, if it's a primary question, a question of primary challenges, Martin O'Malley has been much more forward, that's the governor of Maryland, much more forward with considering running for president than Warren, who over and over says, I'm not running for president, in the present tense, let's say. Perhaps drawing a comparison to Clinton, who many say is currently running and just has to choose not to. O'Malley is one of the others. There are others. I mean, we can go through those too.
The interesting thing about this is that, like, I wonder if like O'Malley's really like I was talking about this with my colleague today actually. I wonder if O'Malley's really fighting for the VP spot.
Sure.
I always think of like O'Malley and Brian Schweitzer, the former governor of Montana, and actually Jay Nixon of Missouri as like, angling to be on the ticket, but they're realistic in that they know they're not going to get that far. They just don't have the gravitas or like the tier one status of Warren or even Biden and definitely Hillary.
Yeah.
Is that what do you do you think O'Malley really is like, we're going to do this, we're going to beat Hillary, the Democratic Party needs another white dude from Maryland?
Well, I don't know if that's the argument. There are a few things here. One is there's a real argument to be made that it would be extremely advantageous to an eventual Hillary Clinton candidacy or nomination to have a challenge from the left, whether that's someone who many consider very serious, like Elizabeth Warren, or someone like Bernie Sanders, who may run, but who is highly unlikely to be elected or to pose a real electoral challenge.
Right, but he's like, there's a definite call within the Dem Party to have some kind of like pressure point to push who like Hillary Clinton to the left, and that would either be Warren or Sanders.
Sure. Now, another question is, are there people out there who legitimately are running so that they can get a cabinet post?
Mm-hmm.
It is certainly a strategic possibility, but that's the kind of question that is highly unlikely to ever be answered because these people are too savvy to ever put that in writing if that's what they're actually doing. And let's not forget that each of these people is likely a political animal. If they are actually running for a vice presidential post, except for the current guy who may do it himself, most often when someone runs for vice president, the idea is in 4 or 8 years, you're up for the top spot. So running for vice president isn't really a self-sacrificing thing to do.
Right. I mean, do you think Joe and you think Joe is still? Is there any indication that Joe's not gonna run for president?
The
We
indic-
know he wants it. He's run before.
That's right. The indication that Biden wouldn't run for president is that Clinton is running for president,
Mhm.
right? Or if she does run for president, that's about it.
It just strikes me, and like with Biden, the funny thing is like even more than Hillary, who was super popular in 2008 and almost won the Democratic primary and really almost became president, I guess you could say.
Right.
Like Biden's fortunes really depend on Obama's, and it just strikes me like if Obama isn't very popular right now, that hurts Biden more than ever, and it hurts Biden more than Hillary because there was enough difference in the perception of Hillary in 2008 to be like, well, even if Democratic voters weren't crazy about Obama, they could be like, well, I told you so. I knew Obama wasn't going to be perfect, but I like Hillary a lot.
Right. It's extremely difficult to talk about what a Biden candidacy would look like right now, if only for the reason that we
Yeah.
just don't know. He hasn't made real remark. I mean, he's joked a few times about wanting to be president. That's about it. We hear reporting. You see reporting all the time that he would love to be president. He's run many times, but he doesn't have the infrastructure Hillary Clinton does right now, which is a remarkable statement considering that he is, a longtime senator, a previous presidential candidate, and he's been, in the White House for 6 years.
Right.
But he is someone that is just so difficult to talk about, just because we don't know. He's a genuine wild card in this situation, and we should add age would be a real factor with him. I have no indication whatsoever that his health isn't up to snuff. We should say that, but 8 years from now, he will be not a young guy.
Right. Good old Joe.
Yeah.
So one of the things also, I mean, like, I really wanted to have you on and talk about this because I'm focused on 2014.
Yeah.
And I guess the weak tie-in to what I've been covering a lot is that Hillary Clinton recently weighed in on the Mississippi Republican primary, which is crazy.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about that. What a day.
And she said, so she said recently, like, the primary shows that you need to expand your base.
Yes.
And this is really important because the story in the Mississippi Senate primary for U.S. Senate is that Senator Thad Cochran, the incumbent, who sort of ended up being the long shot, survived the primary. It was so close, neither candidate could get the 50+1% they needed to avoid a runoff. So it went to a runoff. And the Cochran campaign strategy in the runoff was to attract Democratic and African American voters. The McDaniel campaign, after the runoff, which Cochran won by about 7,000 votes, has been contesting the election, saying there's been some kind of malpractice, some kind of foul play, voter fraud, or something that was going on there.
Right.
And the latest thing that happened today is that on a conference call for the Cochran campaign, where they were basically trying to tell national reporters, the McDaniel campaign needs to really prove their claims. They're not really, they're just talking a lot of stuff right now. There was someone on the call, maybe a blogger, or maybe like a professional reporter, it's not really clear, started asking questions like, why do you, I mean, the question itself was really weird. It was something like, why, if blacks have to harvest cotton, why do you harvest black votes like that? You treat blacks like idiots. And the basic premise was that, I guess the forgivable sort of very, very sort of positive spin on this question to make it discernible at all was that the Cochran campaign, they were saying that the Cochran campaign was making promises to African American voters in Mississippi that they wouldn't reciprocate at all. And they were just sort of using them and treating them like sheep for their own advantages. The call was canceled because this guy, whoever it was just like kept going on and was really not at all professional or in any way sort of acting. I mean, he wasn't asking the question to get it to be answered. He was asking to be heard. And after the call was canceled, there were some people on the call who were clearly McDaniel supporters and one woman on the call said, "If you're a McDaniel supporter, I advise you to not say anything." I mean,
This is sort of a
continuing.
reflection.
It's like it's the right. It's the latest example of a race that has just been crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
crazy because there have
yeah.
been sort of two break-ins.
I mean,
McDaniel has been. There have been repeated reports that McDaniel has been tied to secessionists or neo-Confederates. There are a number of the outside groups supporting McDaniel have pulled out, but McDaniel's campaign says that they keep finding examples of voter fraud.
yeah. Well, let's
And
point
this
out.
campaign keeps going.
Right. Well, let's step back for a second and note that this is the campaign that since something like January has been held up as the proxy for the so-called Republican Civil War, right? So you have
Right.
this heavy involvement of these insurgent conservative outside groups that have heavily invested in McDaniel's candidacy, and Cochran is this veteran of the Senate who is regarded compared
Right,
to
he's a good old boy. I mean, I don't think you can get more establishment than him.
That's right. He's regarded as a total moderate compared to someone like McDaniel.
Right.
And especially, let's point out that especially after the shocking loss of Eric Cantor to David Bratt, in which the outside Tea Party groups played absolutely no role, they are especially eager to prove their mettle, to prove that they can actually get something done. So when Cochran used these old school tactics or these radical tactics, if you want to take either side of this, to win the runoff, this is a sort of terrifying moment for these outside groups who didn't play in Virginia the one time something happened their way, and aren't necessarily playing the role that they want to be playing in Mississippi. So this craziness that happened on this call today is a reflection of the broader fight that's been going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten the sense from continuing to cover this race since McDaniel didn't concede the primary that he's really, I mean, he's sort of left the reservation of, I mean, he hasn't totally left the reservation of these powerful outside groups,
right?
Some of which are now sort of like, they had sort of backed off McDaniel and said it's over, but now they're sort of being like, well, maybe we should talk about voter fraud a little bit more. Maybe something's happening a little bit. I still get the sense that he's a little bit off the reservation here, and it seems kind of hopeless, and this is definitely not what Tea Partiers had hoped for with McDaniel's candidacy, and frankly, like, I thought McDaniel was going to win the runoff, and take the seat, so it's not going how he thought. I mean, conceivably, there could be 6,400 or whatever examples of voter fraud that could disqualify McDaniel, and he could go to court and do this, but I don't see it, and it's gotten very ugly in a very weird way, and not a way that like Tea Partiers had hoped would go with a challenge to an incumbent senator.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's just in my last 3 blogging heads, we've talked about Mississippi, and at this point, I think it's still going to be one of the biggest campaign stories of the 2014 cycle because it just keeps getting more and more nuts.
Well, and let's point out that this is a long shot scenario, but let's point out that this is a primary, and there is going to be a general election against what many people have said is the strongest a Democratic possibility there could be for Mississippi. This former
Travis Childers.
He is highly unlikely to win. We can put that out there right now because he's a Democrat in Mississippi, and that's about that. That said, he's a former representative. He's got the credentials. The party will be very interested in seeing how much they can do. Democrats are watching this with intense interest because they sort of see this as, ongoing dysfunction. The one possibility is, it gives a lot more attention to these guys who otherwise wouldn't have much attention at all put to them.
Right.
But the other side is, maybe some of these voters are paying more attention and saying, I don't want anything to do with either of these guys. Maybe this Democrat doesn't look so bad. That said, we still have
Yeah,
4
I don't
months.
know. I mean, the Democrats I had talked to had always said that the stronger chances for Childers would be against McDaniel, and
Right.
I get the sense that there is sort of a holding pattern mentality still, which is not according to plan, even the worst case scenario of a runoff. But like,
Right.
I don't really know. We
Right.
gotta you're pressed for time, so we gotta switch to soccer because you are. We've been talking about soccer, and the U.S. just lost
Yeah.
yesterday to Belgium in what became like a incredibly painful game.
Yeah.
Because I want to ask you about this because like there was a lot of. I mean, you and I both played soccer growing up. I was a goalie, and
And
I
I had
don't
strong
even know what
antipathy
position.
towards goalies. Yeah.
Really, but you were a goalie for hockey, actually.
Yeah. Different sport.
Ah.
Sorry.
So sad, Gabe. So I mean, one of the things that like, I think the big question going out of this is not well. First, like, what do you think? How do you think the U.S. team played against Belgium? Where in most of the game
Yeah.
they were trailing. Tim Howard, the goalie for the U.S. team, had like 16 saves, which is a
16.
huge amount of saves. And frankly, like, for anyone who, I mean, if you're a goalie, you know that like it's really not a matter of how many saves you have. If you're having to make that many saves, one is going to get in sooner or later.
Well, and not only that, if you have to make that many saves, it's a reflection of something else going wrong.
Right, right.
The
The other
team,
10 players or whatever are clearly not doing their job.
yeah. I mean,
So
let's.
what went wrong? Could we have won that game?
Well, Belgium's a very, very good team. They didn't play particularly well, but Tim Howard played extremely well. Tim Howard was one of the best goaltenders in the world.
Mhm.
This was a good showing by this United States team. I think we shouldn't be surprised if they're competing for the quarterfinals and maybe even further from now on. Yeah, they
Mhm.
could have played much better. The midfield looked very shaky at times. Belgium totally outplayed them at times. But that's not really what you're looking for right now with this team. This is a team that thrives on excitement. They haven't had a game decided by more than 2 goals, by more than 1 goal, rather, since the first game of the 2006 World Cup against the Czech Republic. That was a loss. This team is high octane, full of excitement. There's a lot of commentary that this is great for the sport in the United States and all that.
Are you
That would be
surprised?
fantastic if that's true.
Were you surprised by like? I mean, like I would definitely. I got really excited and was sort of amazed with like the watch parties in different cities, and they moved in Chicago from my hometown from Grant Park to Soldier Field, which is the bigger
Right.
sort of football stadium. Are you surprised with like the size of and the amount of attention the USA team got this year?
I got from all the reaction to the reaction that I should have been more surprised. Maybe I'm just an optimist. I've always thought that soccer is big in the United States because I grew up playing it and I
Really?
grew up here. That said, I grew up, loving it more than most things. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's great. I love that we can, have this huge presence in Soldier Field. But I remember the 2010 World Cup that summer, sitting in the middle of DuPont Circle during the United States England game and not being able to breathe because there were so many people there. I think the real test is going to be whether this can stay. I mean, getting excited once every 4 years is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, really fantastic. I'd love to see it a little bit more frequently than that. The U.S. team could be really good in 2018, but let's point out the U.S. is hosting the Copa America in 2016. That tends to be the South American Championship, but they're combining it with the North American Championship. That's going to be an amazing spectacle, particularly because it's going to be the summer of 2016 where you're going to have these people running for president showing up at these games. And you're going to have some
Do
of
you think presidential candidates? I don't like.
you.
I loved soccer. I was like obsessed with Premier League in high school and wore the
Yeah,
jerseys and all that stuff. I don't. I remember. I mean, it was just not really cool to follow MLS teams and we never. I mean, the action was in Europe. It was with the Champions League.
yeah,
It
that's
was
totally
with
true.
the
But they're
Premier League. It was never with the American teams. I mean, there was
yeah,
your
but
team.
this
Your team is like Boca, right? So
in
like
Argentina,
those
yeah.
teams.
But
Yeah,
the
I
thing
mean those
is,
teams got a little attention, but like I.
Right, but
Maybe that was just the circles I
no,
went.
that's true. Presumably, things are getting better. But 2016, these are national teams. We're going to have the United States potentially playing Brazil. Even when the U.S. isn't playing, a lot of these matches could be in swing states. I mean, I don't want to project too much, but if you have even like Brazil versus Panama, Argentina versus Paraguay in Miami, in Columbus, in Cleveland. Yeah, you better bet some of these people might be showing. Some of these presidential candidates might be showing up because where else are you going to get 70,000 people as a captive audience? I mean, even if it's like talking at the other end of the parking lot, that's a big possibility. And we should point out we don't want to overlook the fact that a large portion of the American soccer fan base comes from the Hispanic community, which of course is extremely important in national elections.
Right. Okay, so you've proven that Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz have an incentive to show their soccer love in 2016. I mean, like, one of the things about this game, the Belgium game, that really sort of depressed me, and it sort of depressed me as a goalie, was how dependent American soccer is on good goalies.
Yeah.
That's their signature position, and I remember, like, on the world stage, the really good American players were always goalies. I grew up loving Brad Friedel, who played for Blackburn FC, Casey Keller, and then Tim Howard. Those were the best players that we could have in Europe.
Yeah, and get ready for Brad Guzan in 2018. He's great too.
So, like, is there hope for, I mean, is that going to change, or is that always going to be, is the American team always going to be, is American soccer always going to be defined by how good our goalies are?
Definitely not.
Which it feels to me like that kind of hemorrhages the sport, because in, like, Brazil, goalies are kind of the pariahs, and strikers and people who score a lot of goals are the ones that get a lot of attention in the game and sort of define Brazilian football.
The American coach Jurgen Klinsmann is on a contract through the next World Cup, specifically because his mandate is to build a culture. He's going to try, and he has been trying to develop younger players and to start. You have to start from the bottom. It's not tenable to just have really good athletes play goalie and that's about it. That said, we shouldn't complain that the United States has good goalies, and I know that's not what you're doing. But it's not important to focus on strikers or to focus on midfielders or whatever. It's important to focus on having a balanced team. The United States could have an extremely balanced team in 2018. I don't think they're going to win the World Cup, but it would be silly for me to say who would win the World Cup in 2018. They're going to have an extremely talented team. You look at who scored the goal against Belgium, Julian Green. He's 18 years old, I think, maybe 19. DeAndre Yedlin, who's 20, played a fantastic game for much of the time, though he's a little bit suspect on defense, but he's in his first year in the MLS. I mean, these are guys who could have serious opportunities to develop and still be young in 4 years. I have no reason to believe there's anything but optimism for the United States team. I'm not saying that they're going to go out and be a favorite, but I think already other countries are seriously taking notice of them.
I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me, I mean, so there have been an influx of stories asking about, like, if soccer has finally arrived in America.
That's right.
And the best take I read was, I think, from Franklin Foer in the New Republic, which basically said soccer had arrived, which I thought was kind of flawed, because to me, the problem with American soccer right now is that we don't have, I mean, it's sort of the same as when I was in high school. We didn't watch MLS. We didn't watch the Chicago Fire and DC United.
You should have.
Good at the time. Well, but we watched the Premier League. We watched League One. We watched Italian soccer, because that's where the best soccer was played in the world. But I think the thing about American soccer is that the people who grew up playing soccer are now finally of age. So it's you and me who played soccer in high school and middle school. We're now, like, adults-ish. And that's the difference than before. And that's much more serious. Like, it's still growing over time. So I think the question of whether soccer has arrived is kind of a bad one because I think soccer is still growing in the U.S. But when are people going to start paying attention to the American League, to the
Yeah, I
MLS?
mean,
And I actually don't know. I don't know what you think. I mean, like, I don't see that happening anytime soon because the MLS is kind of like the AAA of soccer. It's not where the best players go, and if you want to watch the best soccer, you wake up at like weird hours to watch British soccer or
right.
Irish soccer or German soccer.
Well,
I mean, the one thing about this, I've gotten more curious about like the Seattle
yeah,
Sounders um, in
there
this
there are
World Cup
some
cycle.
places where there are huge pockets of fans. The Sounders and the Portland Timbers sell out a huge portion of their games. The MLS,
Yeah,
the only one of the only reasons the MLS isn't a uh, elite league, let's say, and it's gotten quite good. We should stipulate is that it's across the Atlantic from other teams. They have a really weird schedule, a really weird way of doing things that's very Americanized. So when I say weird, I mean weird compared to the Premier League, for example. Um,
hmm
and they have a bad schedule, so it doesn't foster competition against these other teams at all. Um,
hmm
I don't think all hope is lost, but we should point out there's a huge difference between the World Cup and the average soccer match. One of the reasons people are so bullish on soccer arriving in the United States is that there's an intense amount of nationalism that goes with all this. Um,
yeah,
and, people care a lot more about hockey whenever the Olympic hockey tournament is on than they do. We're both hockey fans. You know how it is. Most people don't care at
yeah.
all, especially, let's say, perhaps not in Chicago. But most people don't care at all. And they care when the United
Chicago's done
States is
pretty well
playing.
with hockey lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But I'd love for the
the
soccer to
other
do
big
better in the United
question,
States. Don't get me wrong.
right? I mean, the other big thing that sort of has been in the reporting world about soccer is Ann Coulter's column on like how soccer is un-American,
Yeah.
which like baffles me on a number of levels. But like one of the just strangest parts about that argument is that we may not be as good as other countries at it, but it strikes me like I don't know. It just like when I see the American soccer team where we have this German coach and we have players who are all kinds of colors and there's no defined like there's no particular section of American or like race that does really well in the World Cup. It's a complete melting pot. And it's like a team sport that also sort of highlights the individual. It just strikes me like that was a dumb column. Um, but beyond that, it seems to me that American soccer is very ripe to be very popular in this country. And the New York Times, at least for a little while, has been writing about how like hipster culture has engulfed European soccer. I
Yeah.
mean, I just am wondering, should I jump on the bandwagon and start like closely following the Chicago Fire and DC United, or is that really going to happen? I think soccer is going to keep growing, but the question is really like how fast it's going to grow, and should I just go out and get into it right now or
Well,
wait a little bit
you've
longer?
latched onto a two-sided question here. The question of
Right.
whether soccer will arrive in the United States is very different from will American soccer arrive for Americans.
hmm
Uh, well, I will continue to follow the New York Red Bulls, which is my favorite MLS team, but I will continue to
hmm
follow them less closely than I follow various teams in Europe, just because the quality of play isn't as good. Uh, I'll still follow them. Don't get me wrong, but the question of will soccer arrive in the United States is not necessarily tied intrinsically or directly to the question: is the MLS bound for greatness? There are other ways that
Right.
soccer can be seen as arriving in the United States. I'd love for the MLS to be a great league, and it is a good league. It will get better as more people pay attention to it, just by definition. But we'll see. As you said, I think
Does that
very
mean
correctly, soccer is ripe for growing in the United States, and it has been growing. And the national team has been getting better.
so? What positions are going to be better for American soccer? Is it going to be like a midfielder defense? Is that going to be better? Are we going to see like flashier? Are we going to have like a Lionel Messi one day, or a Ronaldo, or a
Well,
John Terry, or something.
who knows, right? Those guys are once in a generation. But
Yeah.
the United States has and has had world class players in every single one of those positions. We should make no doubt about that. They aren't necessarily all playing right now, but there has at some
So why
point.
don't we have more players like that? Why are the goalies the guys who why is the signature American player the guy that can use his hands? Why is that position?
Well, I mean, there are a number of reasons for that. One is that you name three guys, you can name a handful of more American goalies. Goalies tend to have much more longevity and can play much longer. So those are just the names that we know. Another thing, yeah, it's unavoidable. The best American athletes growing up don't necessarily play soccer. And there isn't that football, basketball, baseball don't have the same amount of competition, don't provide the same amount of competition for the sport in other countries. But as I said, part of Jurgen Klinsmann, the American coach's challenge, is to build up a culture. Now, that's not to say that the next, the great young athletes being born today are all gonna pick up some cleats and run onto the pitch as opposed to running onto a basketball court or a football field.
Right.
But that may be part of it, no doubt. I think that the idea that the United States is a soccer minnow is antiquated. It's simply not true. They've qualified many times in a row for the World Cup. They perform very well most often. And as Klinsmann said, a lot of people called this year's group in the World Cup the group of death. Klinsmann's response is, it is the group of death because we're in it.
Yeah, I mean that's a good response for the guy who's like, we aren't going to win the World Cup, which I actually really like, because we weren't going to win the World Cup. It's just not going to happen. We're going to do well, maybe.
Right. That's exactly right.
That's all we could hope for.
There have only been 19 World Cups, and the number of teams that have won it ever is extremely limited. The United States isn't one of them, but who's to say they can't be one of them in a certain number of years?
Yeah, I am very much hoping that I have a son one day and I can take him to an American soccer game and he will be wowed by that.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that he's going to be one of the star players himself.
Well, maybe that too, but I don't want to put that pressure on him.
Got it.
Gabe, it was great talking with you, bud. I will talk to you later. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Bye.